Before we dive into Megan's breaking point, I want to pause and speak directly to you. If you've ever been mocked by family, laughed at instead of defended, or made to feel like your efforts didn't matter, you are not powerless. It is never too late to stand tall and protect your dignity without shame. But standing tall often comes with a heavy price, the worry of being pushed aside, the second guessing about speaking up, and the overthinking that can steal your peace. That is why I am so proud to share our new guide, 7 Ways to Stop Overthinking After 60, simple practical tips to feel peaceful every day. Inside, you'll find clear, practical steps to quiet the noise of family drama, release the guilt that weighs you down, and finally claim that calm, steady peace you deserve each day. If you're ready to take back your peace, I invite you to learn more by clicking the first link in the description and in the pinned comment. And if this speaks to you, hit that like button and subscribe for more true stories of women who chose dignity over disrespect. Because what happens when Megan finally decides she won't stay quiet after her daughter-in-law's cruel dog food joke is something you will not want to miss. The moment my daughter-in-law joked about feeding my Christmas dishes to the dogs, my hands froze on the serving spoon. I had just set down my casserole, hot from the oven, when Vanessa's voice rang out across the dining room. Don't worry, everyone. If we run out of food, we can always feed Megan's dishes to the dogs. The room went still, then came the sound I'll never forget, a few polite chuckles, a nervous laugh from my son Aaron, and the scraping of silverware as guests pretended they didn't hear what they heard. If you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. Megan, that's me, Megan Ruggles, 68 years old, widow, mother, grandmother. I've spent my whole life feeding people, and in that moment, the woman my son married reduced everything I'd worked for to dog food. I smiled tightly and lowered myself into a chair, careful not to spill the sweet potato casserole that had taken me nearly 2 hours to perfect. The dish was steaming, fragrant with cinnamon and nutmeg, the kind of thing my own mother used to make. But the joy I normally felt at bringing food to the table slipped right out of me when Vanessa's words landed. Aaron sat at the far end, trying not to look at me. He gave a half smile, the kind you give when you don't know what else to do, and then he looked down at his plate. My own son couldn't find the strength to defend me. The table was crowded. Aaron's new boss and his wife were seated by the Christmas tree. A few of Vanessa's friends from her yoga class were there too. I could see the way their smiles faltered, eyes flicking back and forth, unsure if they should laugh or not. Most of them chose silence. Nobody wanted to cross Vanessa. I sat quietly, folding my napkin in my lap, letting the chatter pick back up around me. But inside, I felt like I'd been slapped. I had woken up before dawn that morning. My old oven takes twice as long to heat, so I started the ham before the sun even rose. My kitchen smelled like cloves and brown sugar for hours while I mashed potatoes, baked cornbread, and stirred gravy. I had spent the last of my grocery money for the week just to make sure everything was right. And now, here I was listening to my daughter-in-law tell a room full of people that my food belonged in a dog's bowl. What made it worse was Aaron's reaction. He laughed. Not loudly, not cruelly, but he laughed all the same. My son, who once told me no one made cornbread like his mama, chuckled at his wife's joke instead of speaking up. I reached for my water glass to steady myself. My hand trembled just enough to make the ice clink against the sides. Nobody noticed. Not Aaron. Not Vanessa. Not anyone. Pass the rolls, Vanessa said cheerfully, like nothing had happened. And the evening went on. Plates were filled. Glasses were topped off. Laughter floated through the house, but none of it reached me. I listened to Vanessa brag about the new curtains she ordered from some designer in Chicago. I listened to Aaron's boss talk about their golf trip in Florida. I even listened as one of Vanessa's friends leaned over to whisper how lovely the table looked. But all I could hear was that one sentence echoing over and over in my mind. Feed Megan's dishes to the dogs. I looked at the food I had prepared. The golden crust of the cornbread, the creamy potatoes whipped smooth with butter, the casserole bubbling at the edges. None of it mattered. Not here. Not in this house where I was a guest in my own son's life. It wasn't the first time Vanessa had made a comment like that, but it was the first time she'd said it in front of so many people. And it was the first time Erin laughed. That laugh cut deeper than her words. I swallowed my pride along with my water, setting the glass down carefully. I kept my mouth shut. I knew if I said anything, the rest of the night would turn into a scene, and I didn't want to ruin Christmas for the grandkids. They were in the living room, tearing through their presents, squealing with joy. I wouldn't take that from them. So I stayed quiet. I sat through the entire dinner, smiling when spoken to, nodding when appropriate, keeping my hurt locked inside my chest where nobody could see it. But the truth is, I felt humiliated. I had never been so embarrassed in my life. By the time dessert was served, my stomach ached from the knot that had formed there. I couldn't eat a bite. I excused myself early, saying I wasn't feeling well. I gathered my empty casserole dishes, the ones nobody had touched, and carried them back to my car. It was snowing lightly, the kind of snow that sparkles under streetlights, but even that couldn't lift my mood. My car was cold, the steering wheel stiff under my fingers, but the worst chill came from knowing my own son had sat by while his wife mocked me. Driving home, I replayed the moment again and again. Her voice, his laugh, the look on the guests' faces. It all pressed down on me until I could hardly breathe. I pulled into my driveway, the porch light flickering like it always does, and sat there in the car for a long while. I didn't want to go inside. The house would be quiet, too quiet. George had been gone for 6 years now, and nights like this made the silence unbearable. Finally, I forced myself inside, set the dishes on the counter, and leaned against the sink. My kitchen, once warm with the smell of Christmas cooking, felt hollow now. I told myself I'd forget it. I told myself I'd let it go for the sake of keeping peace. That's what women of my age have always been told to do, isn't it? Swallow the hurt. Smile anyway. Be grateful just to be invited. But deep down, something cracked. I didn't say a word that night. Not one. But I felt the sting settle in a place I couldn't ignore anymore. And that was only the beginning. When I finally set my purse down that night, standing in my quiet kitchen with the clock ticking on the wall, I knew I had to be honest with myself. This wasn't the first time I'd felt like an outsider in my own son's home. It had been building for years, ever since Erin married Vanessa. Let me tell you a little about me, so you'll understand how we got here. I was born and raised right here in Ohio, and except for a few vacations, I've never lived anywhere else. I married my husband, Charles, when I was just 21. We bought a modest house in Springfield, raised Erin in it, and built a simple but steady life. Charles worked at the paper mill until he retired, and I picked up sewing work at home to help make ends meet. I was the one neighbors came to when they needed a hem fixed or curtains shortened. It wasn't glamorous, but it kept us comfortable. 6 years ago, I lost Charles. Cancer took him quick. One day we were sitting at the kitchen table making plans for our garden, and the next I was planning his funeral. After that, I couldn't keep up the old house. The stairs, the yard, the bills, it was too much for me alone. So I sold it and moved into a smaller home on the other side of town. Just 2 bedrooms, a little porch, and a patch of grass out back. It's nothing fancy, but it's mine. I live mostly on my Social Security check, and I still take in small sewing jobs. I hem prom dresses for neighborhood girls, fix buttons for church friends, things like that. It doesn't make much money, but it keeps me busy. The truth is, though, what really keeps me going is cooking. That's the one thing I still feel proud of. I don't have a big garden anymore, but I still cook the way my mama taught me. I handwrite recipes on cards, some so faded I can hardly read them anymore. When I stir a pot of soup or roll out pie crust, I feel close to her and to Charles. Cooking is how I've always shown love, and it's the one way I thought I could still stay connected with Aaron and his family. But when Aaron married Vanessa, things started to change. At first, I was hopeful. Vanessa was younger than him by a few years, always put together, the kind of woman who wore high heels even to the grocery store. She worked in marketing, knew how to talk to people, and seemed determined to climb her way up in the world. I thought she'd bring a spark into Aaron's life. It didn't take long, though, before I noticed her sharp edges. She was quick to correct me in small ways, telling me I didn't need to bring homemade food when we visited, or that the kids didn't like old-fashioned toys. She insisted on buying store-bought desserts, saying they were more professional than anything I could whip up. At first, I brushed it off as her being young, but the comments kept coming. When she and Aaron bought their big new house in Springfield's nicer neighborhood, things got worse. She wanted everything to look perfect for guests, the furniture, the decorations, even the food. She liked to brag about the caterers she hired, the imported wine she served, the way her dinner parties set them apart. She would smile at me sweetly, but always made it clear that my way of doing things didn't measure up. And slowly, my relationship with Aaron started to slip away. He used to call me every week, sometimes just to ask how to fix something around the house or to tell me about the kids. After Vanessa came along, the calls got shorter, then fewer. He said he was busy with work, but I knew it was because Vanessa didn't want me too involved. She liked having control. What hurt most wasn't just her words, but how Aaron went along with them. He never argued, never told her to stop. He just smiled, nodded, and went quiet. That's the way he's always been, peacemaker, avoider. But when the person you love stands by while you're belittled, the silence can cut deeper than the insult. I can't tell you how many nights I've sat at my little kitchen table with a plate of food in front of me, wondering if I was becoming a burden, wondering if maybe Vanessa was right and I was just old-fashioned, out of place in their shiny new world. Still, I kept trying. I baked cookies with the grandkids when they visited. I brought casseroles for holidays. I made the dishes Aaron grew up on, thinking maybe they'd bring him comfort. Sometimes he'd smile and say, "Thanks, Mom, just like old times." And for a moment, I'd feel needed again. But those moments got fewer. That Christmas dinner, when Vanessa joked about feeding my food to the dogs, it was like all the little cuts of the past years came together in one blow. And Aaron's laugh, that quiet, uneasy laugh, felt like a door closing on the last piece of closeness we had. I didn't argue that night. I didn't raise my voice. But as I sat alone in my house afterward, I realized something had shifted. I had spent 6 years swallowing my grief, swallowing my loneliness, swallowing insult after insult just to keep a place at their table. I had convinced myself it was better than being left out completely, but I couldn't keep doing that anymore. That Christmas night, I didn't know exactly what I was going to do, but I knew one thing for sure. The days of me sitting quietly while my son's wife chipped away at my dignity were coming to an end. Christmas morning started the same way it had for me every year. I tied on my old apron, pulled out my recipe cards, and set my kitchen in motion. I may live in a smaller house now, but I still believe a holiday meal should be cooked with care. I set the ham in the oven first, covered with brown sugar and pineapple rings held down by toothpicks. While it baked, I started the stuffing, tearing bread into cubes, just like my mother taught me. I fried onions and celery in butter until the smell filled the whole house. Then I added broth, sage, and pepper, stirring until it looked right. Next came the green bean casserole. I mixed the beans with cream soup, sprinkled on fried onions, and set it aside. I whipped potatoes until they were smooth, dropping in extra butter, even though I probably shouldn't with today's prices. Then came the cornbread, golden and sweet, baked in my old cast iron pan. Finally, I rolled out pie crusts and filled one with apples, the other with pumpkin. By the time I finished, my kitchen was warm and steamy, windows fogged. My feet ached, but I felt proud. This was the food I had always made for Aaron, food he grew up on. I loaded everything into carriers, wrapped them in towels to keep warm, and carried the heavy dishes out to my car. I don't mind telling you, it wasn't easy. At my age, lifting a ham that size and juggling pies on icy steps is no small task. But I did it because I wanted my family to know they were loved. I even stopped at the store the day before, though I shouldn't have with my budget. I spent more than I had planned. Social Security doesn't stretch far, and sewing jobs have been thin this season. But I told myself, it's Christmas. It's worth it. When I pulled up in front of Aaron and Vanessa's house, the driveway was already packed with cars. I carried everything inside one load at a time. My arms shook, but I managed to set the dishes down on their long dining table. Vanessa was standing near the fireplace in a red dress that shimmered under the lights. She was holding a glass of wine, laughing with her friends. She turned and glanced at me, her smile tight. "Oh, good," she said, loud enough for everyone. "Megan brought food too. We'll have plenty." Then, almost under her breath, but still clear enough, maybe even enough to feed the dogs. People laughed, polite little chuckles. Aaron gave that awkward laugh of his, the one he does when he doesn't want to choose sides. He rubbed the back of his neck and looked down at the floor. I froze for a second. My face felt hot. I wanted to walk right out the door. But instead, I kept quiet. I arranged my dishes on the table while Vanessa waved over a server carrying trays from a catering company. "Imported cheeses," she announced, "and lobster bites, just flown in yesterday." She pointed to the sparkling wine chilling in a silver bucket. "From Italy." She made sure to say imported and from Italy more than once. Every guest nodded, impressed. I stood by my cornbread and pies, feeling smaller by the minute. This wasn't new. Over the years, she'd made dozens of little comments like that. She once told me my potato salad was a little too simple for a summer barbecue. Another time, she joked that my kitchen smelled like the 50s when I brought over homemade soup. Once, when I wore my church dress to their party, she whispered to Aaron that I looked a little behind the times. She never said it directly to me, but I heard. I always heard. I swallowed it all down because I wanted to stay close to my son. I wanted my grandkids to know me, so I bit my tongue. I told myself not to make trouble. But that night, standing in her dining room with everyone watching, her words hit harder than ever. She had mocked not just me, but my food, the very thing I poured my love into. The table filled quickly with her store-bought platters. Guests made polite comments about the presentation, the fancy labels. A few tried my food, but most didn't. They stuck to the catered shrimp, the cheeses, the glossy desserts. I sat down at the far end, folding my napkin, listening to conversations that floated around me. I heard about golf trips, new cars, designer handbags, all things I couldn't relate to. I smiled when someone looked my way, nodded when spoken to, but I felt invisible. When dinner started, Vanessa lifted her glass and thanked everyone for coming. She praised the caterer. She praised Aaron for working so hard. She even praised herself for pulling it all together. She never mentioned me or the food I had carried in. I cut into my ham and took a bite, but I couldn't taste it. My stomach was too tight. I forced myself to chew and swallow, but every word I heard only pressed the insult deeper. Vanessa leaned into her friend across the table. "See, It looks fine. I told you she insists on bringing food. Old habits die hard. They both laughed softly, thinking I couldn't hear. But I did. Aaron sat beside his boss, nodding through small talk, glancing at me now and then but never saying a word. He saw. He heard. But he stayed silent. That laugh of his earlier, it stung worse than anything. A son should protect his mother, not laugh along when she's mocked. But he had chosen to keep peace with his wife instead of standing by me. I kept my head down. I ate what little I could, and I reminded myself of the grandkids in the living room. Their squeals of joy over new toys were the only thing that softened the ache in my chest. I didn't want to ruin their Christmas by causing a scene. So I swallowed the humiliation. I stayed quiet, just like I always had. But as I sat there, staring at the flickering candles on Vanessa's perfect table, I felt something shift inside me. It wasn't anger exactly. It was more like a deep, heavy sadness mixed with the start of resolve. For years, I had told myself that silence was the price of belonging, that keeping peace was worth more than defending myself. But in that moment, I wondered if maybe peace built on disrespect wasn't peace at all. The meal went on. Plates passed back and forth. Laughter rose and fell. And when it was time for dessert, people complimented Vanessa again on her perfect evening. I gathered my dishes as soon as I could without drawing attention. I carried them to my car one by one, the cold air biting at my hands. And as I drove home that night, I knew something had changed. I didn't know what would happen next, but I knew one thing: I couldn't keep swallowing this kind of treatment forever. Would you have spoken up at that table, or sat quiet like I did? Hit the share button so other women can weigh in too. I didn't sleep much that night. I tossed and turned, my mind stuck on the moment Vanessa's words cut through the room. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard her laugh, then saw Aaron's face when he tried to play along. It played like a record I couldn't shut off. When the morning light crept through my curtains, I felt heavy. I made myself a cup of instant coffee, the kind I drink every morning, and sat at the kitchen table. My dishes